The sun was setting over the sprawling junkyard, casting long shadows across the piles of discarded metal and alien machinery. Jae-hyun tightened his grip on the wrench in his hand as he crouched beside a half-buried piece of tech. His workshop wasn't much, just a small corner of the trade hub's outskirts, but it was enough for him to tinker with whatever scraps he could find. He had always been good at fixing things, even if those things didn't belong to anyone anymore. Today, though, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Jae-hyun paused, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. That's when he heard it, a faint sound, almost like a whisper coming from deeper within the junkyard. Curious, Jae-hyun stood and followed the noise. It led him past towering mounds of scrap metal, glowing circuits, and strange devices whose purpose he couldn't begin to guess. The sound grew clearer as he moved closer, until finally, he saw her. She was sitting on the ground, hunched over and trembling slightly. Her body shimmered under the fading sunlight, not because of sweat or tears, but because her skin, or what passed for skin, was made of tiny, crystalline structures that refracted light into dazzling colors. She looked young, no older than a teenager, and she was clearly frightened. Jae-hyun took a cautious step forward. "Hey," he said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched at the sound of his voice but didn't move otherwise. Her wide, unseeing eyes stared straight ahead, though they weren't truly blind. They were blank, devoid of the irises or pupils humans had. Instead, they glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft inner light. I'm lost," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't see." Jae-hyun frowned. "You're blind?" he asked gently. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "Not exactly. My kind sees differently, but here." She gestured weakly around her. "Here. There's too much noise. Too many reflections. I can't make sense of anything." Her words puzzled him, but Jae-hyun didn't press further. Instead, he knelt down beside her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Yun-soo," she said after a moment's hesitation. "And you?" "Jae-hyun." He smiled faintly. "Well, Yun-soo, you're lucky I found you. This place isn't safe for someone like you, or anyone really. How did you end up here?" Yun-soo hesitated again, as if unsure whether to trust him. Finally, she sighed. "My ship crashed nearby. I thought I could find help, but—" She trailed off, looking down at her hands. "I didn't expect this." Jae-hyun nodded slowly. Shipwrecks weren't uncommon near the trade hub. Plenty of vessels passed through the area, and not all of them survived the journey. Still, it was rare to encounter survivors, especially ones who looked so otherworldly. "I'll help you," Jae-hyun said firmly. "But first we need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" Yun-soo nodded, though she still looked uncertain. With some effort, she climbed to her feet, leaning on Jae-hyun for support. Together, they made their way back toward his workshop, navigating carefully through the maze of debris. Once inside, Jae-hyun guided Yun-soo to a chair and handed her a cup of water. She accepted it gratefully, sipping slowly while he studied her. Her crystalline form fascinated him, not just because it was beautiful, but because it hinted at possibilities beyond human understanding. If only he could figure out how her biology worked, maybe he could help her regain her ability to navigate. "What do you see?" Jae-hyun asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "When you look at things, I mean." Yun-soo tilted her head, considering the question. "Colors," she said finally. "Patterns. Light bends differently depending on what it touches. Normally I can read those patterns, understand them, but here—" She waved a hand vaguely. "Everything is wrong." Jae-hyun nodded thoughtfully. "So it's like sensory overload?" "Yes," Yun-soo agreed. "Too much information, too fast. I can't process it." An idea began to form in Jae-hyun's mind. It was risky, maybe even impossible, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he could do something to help her. After all, solving problems was what he did best. "I might be able to help," he said cautiously, "if you're willing to trust me." Yun-Su's luminous eyes widened slightly. "How?" Jae-hyun gestured to the cluttered shelves lining the walls of his workshop. "I've got parts. Lots of them. Maybe I can build something, some kind of device that translates what you're seeing into something simpler, something your brain can handle." For a moment, Yun-Su said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." And so Jae-hyun got to work. For days he barely slept, pouring every ounce of his focus into designing and assembling the prototype visor. He scavenged components from old drones, repurposed lenses from broken cameras, and even cannibalized parts from his own equipment. The process was painstaking, but Jae-hyun refused to give up. Finally, after countless hours of trial and error, the visor was ready. It wasn't pretty, far from it, but it worked. When Jae-hyun placed it gently over Yun-Su's eyes, she gasped audibly. "It's clear," she murmured, her voice filled with wonder. "I can see." Jae-hyun grinned, relief washing over him. "Does it hurt? Do you feel dizzy?" "No," Yun-Su replied, shaking her head. "It's perfect." As she explored the workshop with newfound clarity, Jae-hyun watched her, a mixture of pride and awe swelling in his chest. He hadn't just fixed a problem, he'd given her a gift. But as Yun-Su turned to thank him, her expression darkened. "You should be careful," she warned. "There are people, beings, who won't approve of what you've done. Like they may come looking for you." Jae-hyun frowned. "Who?" Yun-Su hesitated, then shook her head. "Just promise me you'll stay alert. Please." Though her warning unsettled him, Jae-hyun dismissed it as paranoia. After all, how could helping someone possibly lead to trouble? Little did he know, his life was about to change forever. The days that followed Yun-Su's departure were quiet, almost too quiet. Jae-hyun tried to return to his usual routine, tinkering with gadgets and sorting through the piles of scrap metal he called his workshop. But something felt off. The memory of Yun-Su's warning lingered in the back of his mind, like a shadow he couldn't shake. She had spoken so seriously, her voice filled with an urgency that made him uneasy. Still, he told himself it was nothing. How could building a simple visor cause trouble? And he had only helped someone in need. But then, strange things began to happen. It started small. One morning, Jae-hyun noticed that his tools weren't where he'd left them. At first, he thought he was just forgetful, but as the days went on, the disturbances grew more obvious. Pieces of alien tech he had salvaged, parts he'd planned to use for future projects, were missing. Entire shelves in his workshop seemed rearranged, as if someone had been searching for something. Jae-hyun frowned, glancing around the cluttered space. "Who would want this junk?" he muttered to himself. His neighbor, an elderly mechanic named Mr. Park, stopped by later that day. Mr. Park was a gruff man with a kind heart, always ready with advice or a cup of tea. This time, though, his tone was serious. "You've got visitors," Mr. Park said, nodding toward the edge of the junkyard. Jae-hyun straightened, his curiosity piqued. "Visitors?" "Yeah," Mr. Park replied, lowering his voice. "Big ones, 4 of them, all dressed in black armor. They've been poking around your place for the last couple of days." Jae-hyun's stomach tightened. "What did they look like?" Mr. Park shrugged. "Not human, that's for sure. Tall, built like soldiers. Didn't say much, but they didn't seem friendly either." For a moment, Jae-hyun considered asking more questions, but Mr. Park was already walking away, muttering about minding his own business. Left alone with his thoughts, Jae-hyun felt a chill creep up his spine. Could these strangers be connected to Yun-Su? Had her warning been more serious than he'd realized? That night, unable to sleep, Jae-hyun sat at his workbench and staring at the half-finished projects scattered across it. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. If those armored figures were looking for him, what did they want? And why now, after weeks of peace? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a faint hum filled the air. Jae-hyun froze, recognizing the sound immediately. It was the same frequency his comms device used when receiving a transmission. Frowning, he reached for the device and activated it. A holographic image flickered to life above the table, revealing Yoon-soo's face. Her expression was tense, her luminous eyes wide with fear. "Jae-hyun," she said urgently, "you have to leave. Now." "Leave?" Jae-hyun echoed, startled. "Why? What's going on?" "There's no time to explain," Yoon-soo replied, her voice trembling. "The enforcers, they're coming for you. You can't stay there." "The enforcers?" Jae-hyun repeated, his mind racing. "Who are they?" "They're dangerous," Yoon-soo said, hesitating as if choosing her words carefully. "They protect our people, but not in the way you might think. They don't like outsiders interfering, especially with technology. The Visor, it's caused problems." Jae-hyun's heart sank. "I was just trying to help," he protested. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "I know," Yoon-soo said softly, "but intentions don't matter to them. Please, Jae-hyun, you have to go somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find you." Before Jae-hyun could respond, the transmission cut out abruptly, leaving him staring at empty space. For a long moment, he sat motionless, his mind reeling. The Visor had been a gift, a solution to a problem. How could it possibly be seen as a threat? Still, Yoon-soo's warning weighed heavily on him. He glanced around his workshop, taking stock of his options. Running wasn't in his nature. He preferred solving problems head-on. But even he could recognize when danger loomed. Yet something held him back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was disbelief. Whatever it was, it kept him rooted in place. Over the next few days, the signs became impossible to ignore. Footsteps echoed outside his workshop late at night. Shadows moved just beyond the edges of his vision. Once, he caught sight of a figure standing near the junkyard's entrance, clad in sleek black armor that reflected no light. The soldiers, or enforcers, as Yoon-soo had called them, were closing in. Despite the mounting evidence, Jae-hyun struggled to act. He convinced himself that perhaps Yoon-soo had exaggerated the threat, or that the enforcers would simply question him and leave. After all, what harm had he really done? Helping someone see wasn't a crime, was it? Then, one evening, everything changed. Jae-hyun was reviewing blueprints for a new project when a loud crash shattered the silence. Startled, he jumped to his feet, his heart pounding. Another crash followed, closer this time. Someone, or something, was breaking into his workshop. Grabbing a makeshift weapon, a heavy wrench from his workbench, Jae-hyun crept toward the source of the noise. The door burst open and 4 figures stepped inside, their armored forms towering over him. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but their presence radiated authority and menace. Jae-hyun swallowed hard, gripping the wrench tighter. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steadier than he expected. One of the figures stepped forward, removing their helmet to reveal sharp, angular features and piercing eyes. "Commander Rinde," the figure said, their voice cold and clipped. "We are here for you, human." "For me?" Jae-hyun echoed, his mind racing. "Why?" Rinde's gaze narrowed. "You interfered where you did not belong. Your actions have consequences far beyond your understanding. Surrender the Visor and any related research. Come quietly, and you may yet avoid further trouble." Jae-hyun's mind raced. He didn't have the original Visor anymore. It was with Yoon-soo. But he still had the blueprints and notes he'd made during its creation. Handing them over felt wrong, like admitting defeat before even trying to fight back. I don't have it, he lied, his voice firm despite the fear coursing through him. And even if I did, that I wouldn't give it to you. Rinde's expression darkened. Then we will take it by force. Before Jae-hyun could react, the enforcers spread out, systematically searching the workshop. Panic surged through him. He couldn't let them find his notes, not without knowing why they wanted them so badly. Thinking quickly, he activated a hidden failsafe, a decoy drone programmed to create distractions. With a whirring sound, the drone launched itself from a concealed compartment, zipping past the enforcers and drawing their attention. Seizing the opportunity, Jae-hyun bolted for the door. His heart pounded as he sprinted through the junkyard, dodging piles of scrap metal and ducking behind debris. Behind him, he heard shouts and the heavy thud of armored footsteps giving chase. He didn't dare look back. Focusing instead on reaching the safety of the trade hub's crowded streets. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jae-hyun emerged onto a bustling avenue lined with stalls and vendors. The noise and chaos of the marketplace enveloped him, masking his presence from his pursuers. Gasping for breath, he slipped into the crowd, blending in with the throng of beings from across the galaxy. For now, he was safe. But Jae-hyun knew the reprieve wouldn't last long. The enforcers would come for him again, and next time they might not be so easily evaded. As he disappeared into the sea of faces, one thought burned in his mind. He needed answers and allies if he hoped to survive. Jae-hyun's heart was still racing as he pushed deeper into the crowded marketplace. The noise around him was overwhelming. Vendors shouting prices, customers haggling, and strange alien languages blending into a chaotic symphony. But for once, Jae-hyun didn't mind the chaos. It hid him, shielding him from the enforcers who were no doubt still searching for him. He moved quickly, weaving through the throng of beings with his head down. His mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days. Yoon-soo's warning, the break-in at his workshop, the armored figures. Everything pointed to one conclusion. The Visor had stirred up trouble far beyond what he'd imagined. But why? What made it so dangerous? As he reached the edge of the market, Jae-hyun spotted a small, dimly lit stall tucked away in a corner. The sign above it read, "Repairs and Supplies." Hoping to catch his breath and gather his thoughts, he stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of oil and burnt circuits. Shelves lined with tools and spare parts filled the tiny space. Behind the counter stood a young woman, her sharp eyes scanning Jae-hyun as he entered. She wore a patched-up jacket over a plain shirt, and her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. Something about her demeanor suggested she wasn't someone to be trifled with. "You look like you're in a hurry," she said, leaning casually against the counter. Her tone was casual, but there was an edge to it that caught Jae-hyun's attention. "Just trying to stay out of sight," Jae-hyun replied cautiously. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the enforcers bursting through the door. The woman smirked. "You're not the first person to come here looking for a place to hide. Name's Soo-min. What's yours?" "Jae-hyun," he answered after a moment's hesitation. And I'm not hiding. I'm just avoiding some unwanted attention." Soo-min raised an eyebrow. "Unwanted attention from who? Let me guess. Big guys in black armor?" Jae-hyun's eyes widened. "How did you know?" She shrugged. "Word gets around. Those enforcers have been poking their noses into everyone's business lately. They're not exactly subtle. Now tell me, what did you do to piss them off?" Jae-hyun hesitated. He barely knew this woman, and trusting her felt risky. But something about her confidence, and the fact that she already seemed to know about the enforcers, made him think she might be able to help. "I built something," he began slowly. "A device. For someone who needed it. Turns out they didn't want me messing with their tech." Soo-min tilted her head, studying him carefully. "Tech for who? One of those Varith?" Jae-hyun nodded. I'm surprised by how much she seemed to know. Yeah, a girl named Yun-Su. She couldn't navigate properly without it. Su-min let out a low whistle. You've got guts, messing with Varith biology. Most people wouldn't dare. It wasn't supposed to cause problems, Jae-hyun protested. I was just helping her. Helping isn't always enough, Su-min said, her voice softening slightly. The Varith are proud. They don't take kindly to outsiders meddling in their affairs, especially when it comes to their weaknesses. Weaknesses? Jae-hyun echoed, frowning. What do you mean? Su-min leaned closer, lowering her voice. Their reliance on light, it's both their strength and their flaw. If someone figured out how to exploit it... She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Jae-hyun's stomach tightened. Could the Visor really expose such a vulnerability? He hadn't thought about it that way before. All he'd wanted was to help Yun-Su see again. The idea that his invention could be used as a weapon against her people hadn't crossed his mind. So what do I do now? He asked finally. They'll keep coming for me. Su-min crossed her arms, thinking. First, we need to figure out what they're after. Do you still have the device? No, Jae-hyun admitted. Yun-Su has it. But I kept notes, blueprints, schematics. They're hidden, but if the enforcers find them... They will, Su-min interrupted, which means we need to get to them first. And while we're at it, maybe we can turn the tables on these enforcers. Jae-hyun blinked. Turn the tables? How? Su-min grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. Leave that part to me. You focus on staying alive. With Su-min's help, Jae-hyun devised a plan. First, they needed to retrieve his notes before the enforcers found them. Then, they would use the information to expose the truth about the Visor, not as a threat, but as a tool for good. If they could rally support from sympathetic factions within the Varith community, they might stand a chance against the Caliph order. The next morning, Jae-hyun returned to his workshop under the cover of darkness. Su-min accompanied him, armed with a small EMP device designed to disable any surveillance systems the enforcers might have left behind. As they approached the junkyard, Jae-hyun felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound carried a hint of danger. When they reached the workshop, Jae-hyun noticed immediately that it had been ransacked. Tools were scattered across the floor, shelves overturned, and pieces of equipment smashed. The enforcers had clearly been thorough in their search, but Jae-hyun knew his notes were cleverly hidden in a false bottom beneath his workbench. Stay alert, Su-min whispered, scanning the area. We're not alone. Jae-hyun nodded, moving quickly to the workbench. His hands trembled as he pried open the hidden compartment, revealing a small data chip containing all his research. Relief washed over him as he pocketed the chip, but it was short-lived. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. They're here! Su-min hissed, pulling out the EMP device. Get ready! Moments later, 4 figures emerged from the shadows, their black armor gleaming in the moonlight. Commander Rinde led the group, her expression cold and unyielding. Hand over the data, she demanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Jae-hyun clenched his fists, standing his ground. Why should I? What makes you think you have the right to decide what's safe or dangerous? Rinde took a step forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her weapon. Because your interference threatens the survival of my people. Your ignorance is a liability we cannot afford. Before Jae-hyun could respond, Su-min activated the EMP device. A burst of energy surged outward, disabling the enforcers' weapons and communications equipment. Caught off guard, the soldiers stumbled back, giving Jae-hyun and Su-min the opening they needed. Now! Su-min shouted, grabbing Jae-hyun's arm and pulling him toward the exit. They ran, and dodging debris and leaping over obstacles as the enforcers recovered and gave chase. The junkyard became a maze of shadows and echoes, every step bringing them closer to freedom. Finally, they reached the edge of the market, disappearing into the bustling crowd once more. For now, they were safe. But Jae-hyun knew the battle was far from over. With the data chip in hand, he and Soo-min had a fighting chance, but the road ahead would be anything but easy. Jae-hyun and Soo-min didn't stop running until they were deep in the heart of the trade hub, surrounded by the noise and chaos of the marketplace. The crowd swallowed them whole, blending their forms into the sea of beings bustling about. For a moment, Jae-hyun allowed himself to breathe, leaning against a stall as his chest heaved from the sprint. Soo-min glanced around, and her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of pursuit. "We lost them, for now," she said, her voice low but steady. "But we can't stay here long. They'll regroup and come after us again." Jae-hyun nodded, clutching the data chip tightly in his hand. It felt heavy, not just because of its physical weight, but because of what it represented. This tiny piece of tech held everything: the blueprints, the schematics, the key to understanding how the visor worked. And now, it was also the only thing standing between him and the enforcers. "What do we do next?" Jae-hyun asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "They won't stop until they get this." Soo-min crossed her arms, thinking. "We need to expose the truth. Show people what the visor really is, a tool, not a weapon. If we can rally support from others, especially those within the Varith community, we might stand a chance." "But how?" Jae-hyun pressed. "The enforcers control the narrative. No one will believe us." "They will if we hit them where it hurts," Soo-min replied with a sly smile. "We find proof of their hypocrisy, something that shows they're using fear to control their own people. Then we broadcast it to everyone." Jae-hyun frowned. "Proof like what?" "Like the real reason they're so afraid of the visor," Soo-min explained. "You said Yun-soo told you the visor exposed vulnerabilities in their reliance on light. What if we could show that the Kalith Order isn't protecting their people? They're exploiting those weaknesses to maintain power." It made sense, in a way Jae-hyun hadn't considered before. And the enforcers weren't just worried about outsiders messing with Varith biology, they were scared of losing control. If the visor proved that their species' dependence on light could be overcome, it would undermine the authority of the Kalith Order. "But how do we get that kind of proof?" Jae-hyun asked. "We can't exactly waltz into their headquarters and ask nicely." Soo-min smirked. "That's where I come in. I've got connections, people who know things. We'll start by finding someone inside the Kalith Order willing to talk. In the meantime, we need to lay low." Over the next few days, Jae-hyun and Soo-min worked tirelessly to piece together a plan. They rented a small room above a noisy bar, far enough from the junkyard to avoid detection, but close enough to stay connected to the trade hub's underground networks. During the day, Soo-min reached out to her contacts, gathering information about the Kalith Order and their operations. At night, Jae-hyun pored over the data chip, studying every detail of the visor's design to ensure he understood its implications fully. One evening, as Jae-hyun sat at the cluttered table reviewing his notes, Soo-min burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "I found someone," she announced, tossing a datapad onto the table. "An insider. Someone who doesn't agree with the Kalith Order's methods." Jae-hyun picked up the datapad, scanning the information displayed on its screen. The name belonged to a Varith scientist named Kai Lin, who had once worked closely with the Kalith Order but had since gone rogue. According to Soo-min's source, Kai Lin had access to classified files detailing the Order's experiments and their motives. "This could be it," Jae-hyun said, his voice filled with cautious hope. "If we can meet with Kai Lin, maybe we can get the evidence we need." Soo-min nodded. "There's a catch, though. Kai Lin's hiding and getting to them won't be easy, but I think I know a way." The next morning, Jae-hyun and Soo-min set out for an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the trade hub. The building was old and crumbling, its walls covered in graffiti and rust. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floor creaked under their weight as they moved deeper into the shadows. Waiting for them was Kai Lin, a tall, slender figure with crystalline skin that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. Their posture was tense, wary, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in their glowing eyes. "You're the human who built the Visor," Kai Lin said, their voice soft yet firm. "Why have you come?" Jae-hyun stepped forward, holding out the data chip. "I need your help. The Caliph Order wants to destroy this technology, but it's not dangerous. It's a gift, a way to help your people see differently. If we can prove that, maybe we can change their minds." Kai Lin studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I've seen what the Order does to those who question them. They twist truths, exploit fears, all to maintain control. If you're willing to fight them, I'll share what I know." With Kai Lin's help, Jae-hyun and Soo-min uncovered damning evidence of the Caliph Order's manipulations. Files revealed secret experiments designed to suppress alternative ways of seeing, keeping the Varith population dependent on traditional methods. There were records of dissenters silenced, ideas crushed, all in the name of preserving order. Armed with this information, the trio devised a bold plan. Using Soo-min's network, they hacked into the trade hub's public communication system, broadcasting the evidence to every screen and device in the area. The message was clear. The Caliph Order wasn't protecting the Varith people, it was controlling them. As the broadcast spread, outrage rippled through the trade hub. Humans, aliens, and even some Varith citizens began questioning the Order's authority. Protests erupted, demanding transparency and reform. But the fight wasn't over yet. Commander Rin-dae and her enforcers weren't about to let their grip on power slip without a fight. Late one night, but as Jae-hyun and Soo-min prepared for another round of broadcasts, a familiar hum filled the air, the sound of armored footsteps approaching. Jae-hyun tightened his grip on a makeshift weapon, his heart pounding. "They're here." Soo-min nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Then we make our stand." Moments later, the door burst open, and 4 figures clad in black armor stormed into the room. Commander Rin-dae led the charge, her helmet removed to reveal a face etched with anger and frustration. "You've caused enough trouble," she snarled, drawing her weapon. "This ends now." Jae-hyun stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of defiance rather than surrender. "No," he said firmly. "It doesn't end here. Your people deserve better than fear and lies. We're going to make sure they get the truth." For a moment, tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Then unexpectedly, Rin-dae hesitated. Her gaze flickered to the screens displaying the evidence, to the faces of those rallying outside, and finally, to Jae-hyun. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of doubt, perhaps even regret. "The Order has always protected us," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But at what cost?" Before anyone could respond, a new voice joined the fray. It was Yoon-soo, stepping into the room with quiet determination. Her luminous eyes locked onto Rin-dae, unwavering. "The Visor gave me sight," Yoon-soo said, her voice calm but powerful. "But it also gave me hope for a future where we don't live in fear. Isn't that worth fighting for?" Rin-dae stared at her, her weapon lowering ever so slightly. For the first time, uncertainty clouded her features. The standoff lingered, fragile and uncertain, until finally, Rin-dae lowered her weapon completely. "Perhaps," she admitted, her voice barely audible, "but the path forward won't be easy." Yoon-soo smiled faintly. "Nothing worth doing ever is." As the tension eased, Jae-hyun felt a surge of relief wash over him. The battle wasn't won, not entirely, but it was a start. Together, they had taken the first step toward change, proving that even the smallest acts of courage could spark something greater. The air in the room was thick with tension, but something had shifted. Commander Rinde's weapon hung loosely at her side, her rigid stance softening as she looked between Yun-Su and Jae-hyun. For the first time, doubt flickered across her face, a crack in the armor of certainty that had defined her role as an enforcer. Yun-Su stepped forward, her crystalline form glowing faintly in the dim light. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that demanded attention. "Commander," she said gently, "you swore to protect our people. But what happens when protection becomes control? What happens when fear blinds us more than any loss of sight ever could?" Rinde didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at her soldiers, who stood frozen, unsure how to act without their leader's command. Finally, she turned back to Yun-Su, her expression conflicted. "You think I don't see the cost of my actions?" she asked quietly. "Every decision I've made has been for the survival of our kind." "And yet," Yun-Su replied, "survival shouldn't mean living in chains. The Visor showed me another way, a way to embrace change instead of fearing it. Isn't that worth protecting too?" For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched taut like a wire, until finally Rinde let out a heavy sigh. She holstered her weapon and took a step back, signaling to her soldiers to do the same. "Perhaps you're right," she admitted, though the words seemed to pain her. "But this isn't over. The order won't simply dissolve because of one broadcast or one argument." Jae-hyun exchanged a glance with Su-min, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. He knew she was right. This was just the beginning. The fight ahead would be long and difficult, but they had planted a seed. Now it was up to others to nurture it. "We're not asking for everything to change overnight," Jae-hyun said, his voice steady despite the nerves still buzzing beneath his skin. "We're asking for a chance, to show that progress doesn't have to mean destruction, that helping each other can make us stronger, not weaker." Rinde studied him carefully, her sharp eyes searching for something, perhaps sincerity, perhaps resolve. Whatever she found, it seemed to satisfy her, at least for now. "Very well," she said finally. "I'll stand down, for now. But if your intentions are anything less than pure, know that I won't hesitate to stop you." With that, she motioned for her soldiers to follow her out of the room. As the door closed behind them, the weight in the air lifted slightly, leaving everyone inside to breathe a little easier. "Well," Su-min said, breaking the silence with a wry grin, "that went better than expected." Jae-hyun couldn't help but chuckle, though the sound was tinged with exhaustion. Better than expected was putting it mildly. Yet they had faced down 4 elite soldiers and walked away unscathed, at least for now. But he knew the real work was only beginning. Over the next few days, the fallout from the broadcast rippled through the trade hub and beyond. News of the Caliph Order's manipulations spread quickly, sparking debates among humans and aliens alike. Some praised Jae-hyun and Yun-Su for exposing the truth, while others accused them of meddling in affairs they didn't understand. Still, the tide of public opinion seemed to be shifting, with more voices calling for reform within the Varith community. Yun-Su became a symbol of hope for many, especially those who had long felt stifled by the Order's strict rules. She traveled throughout the trade hub, speaking to crowds and sharing her story. Her message was simple. Change was possible, but it required courage and trust. Meanwhile, Jae-hyun returned to his workshop, not to hide, but to innovate. Inspired by the success of the Visor, he began working on new projects designed to bridge gaps between species. He collaborated with Kai Lin and other rogue scientists, pooling their knowledge to create tools that could benefit both humans and aliens. It wasn't easy. Resources were scarce, and skepticism lingered. but every small victory fueled his determination. Su-min stayed by his side, offering guidance and support whenever needed. Though she teased him about his idealism, she never doubted his ability to make a difference. "You've got guts, Jae-hyun," she told him one evening as they reviewed blueprints for a new device. "And guts like yours, they tend to inspire people." As weeks turned into months, and the impact of Jae-hyun's actions grew clearer, the Kalith Order's grip on the Varith population weakened, replaced by calls for transparency and cooperation. While resistance remained, particularly from older generations clinging to tradition, younger members of the species embraced the possibility of change. One day, as Jae-hyun tinkered with a prototype in his workshop, Yoon-soo appeared in the doorway. Her presence still brought a smile to his face, even after all they had been through. "How's it coming along?" she asked, her voice warm and curious. "Slowly," Jae-hyun admitted, holding up the half-finished device. "But it's getting there. This one's meant to help translate languages in real time. Could be useful for trade negotiations or just making friends." Yoon-soo laughed softly, the sound like chimes in the wind. "You always did think big, didn't you?" "I guess so," Jae-hyun replied with a shrug. "But why stop at fixing problems when you can solve them before they start?" Yoon-soo stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything." Jae-hyun shook his head, embarrassed by the gratitude. "I didn't do much. You're the one who inspired people to believe in something better." "Maybe," Yoon-soo said with a smile, "but you gave me the tools to see it, and to share it with others. That makes you part of the story, too." They stood there for a moment, the hum of machinery filling the quiet space between them. Outside, the trade hub buzzed with life, a testament to the resilience of its inhabitants. Despite the challenges they faced, the community continued to grow, and adapting and evolving in ways no one could have predicted. Jae-hyun leaned back, letting the moment sink in. He had never set out to change the world, or even two worlds. All he had wanted was to help someone in need. But in doing so, he had sparked a chain reaction, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond his own. As he looked at Eun-soo, her luminous eyes reflecting the glow of his workshop lights, Jae-hyun felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but he wasn't alone. Together, they, and countless others, had taken the first steps toward a brighter future. And sometimes, Jae-hyun thought, that was enough.